before St. Valentine's Day. We were talking about our darling, little darling called Balkan Medical Journal. And some long nights we work together. And today is good for us. Session is working with editors and reviewers. I want to introduce.
Okay, I hope I will be brief now, and so that we have more time to work with actual journalists and then for our clinic. Until when do we have it? Until 10:20 again? Or? Yes. Yeah, 10:20. Okay.
Or whatever you like.
Okay, we'll see how long it takes us and where we go. Actually, it's very, this topic is difficult and easy at the same time. Difficult in a way that it is different for different journals. With journals with different audiences, journals with different means. So I think that each journal has to find its best way to work with authors and reviewers. And what I'm going to do this morning is to actually try to present some evidence, particularly about peer review, because a lot of research has been done about peer review in general and journals in general. And we know some things about what works in peer review, but mostly it is about what doesn't work in the peer review. So I will go through that evidence, and I think that based on that you can then draw conclusions about what is best for your journal and how to proceed with this. As with authors, I think that for small and scholarly journals of size of Balkan medical journals and other small journals, it's very difficult to find authors. No, you have to start from your friends and then go to your citizens and then look for your countrymen and people from around you, at least to start a journal. When you started your journal, you definitely remember how difficult it was to attract authors. And remember, yesterday I showed that vicious circle where the problem actually starts with authors, because our authors, the target authors that we have, are interested not publishing in our journals because they are of low impact, they may not be even indexed. If they are indexed, they have low impact factor, which is not enough for somebody's PhD thesis, and so on and so on. So actually, authors in that small journals are targeting are producing very little research, and when they produce that research, they want to publish it in the best journal possible that would benefit them most, and that is not your journal. So it's very difficult to find the best outlet. So I remember that when we started the Croatian Medical Journal, my husband, who he was the co-editor of the journal, said that he would, use friendships, bribery, that he got best papers when he was, with his friends in the toilet, and he's asking, yes, you have to send me a paper. And we were lucky in a way that we turned our kind of misery into benefit. We started the journal during the war in Croatia, and it was the opportunity for us to collect all the evidence about war trauma and different aspects, medical aspects of war. And in a way, this is how we built our expertise and built the name of the journal. For example, the Balkan Medical Journal has the potential to serve a wider region than this university and this region or Turkey, so it has the potential to attract a wider audience. And when you start looking for authors, you start looking from your colleagues, and what is important is students may be a good source for the publications in your journals. I don't know how it is in Turkey, but for our medical students, they have to do some research. It doesn't have to be major research, it can be observational research, and they have to write their thesis, diploma thesis, and defend it in order to get an MD degree. Because doctorate degree, Doctor of Medicine degree, requires that you have a thesis and you defend it in front of some committee. then only you can get the doctoral degree. So that's also a source of good articles, because sometimes these little pieces of research do not get published, but may be useful to you. Then you have professional associations in your country, especially if you're a specialty journal. That can be also the source. And one of the things that we found was publishing theme issues. Very often, colleagues who are organizing a conference say, oh, why don't you publish a supplement? But publishing supplements is not good for the journal, because it kind of ruins the impact factor. I think that Thomson Reuters counts it as a full issue, but they consider it that it's not non-reviewed publication of a journal. So it's really questionable to prove the quality of published supplements, especially if there are supplements from conferences. So we decided that we're not going to publish supplements, because we also had experience from journals from Croatia that fell out of Web of Science because their impact factor was decreasing, and it was decreasing because they were publishing a lot of conference supplements and didn't have enough, they had lots of papers, very few citations, and they were dropped out of Web of Science. Of course, they did it for money, because these conference proceedings and conference abstract books were paid, but then it was detrimental to the quality and the future of the journal. So we decided to publish theme issues. And as I showed yesterday, some of these things, some of these meetings and theme issues were very beneficial for the journal versus its impact factor, because every 2 years we published a theme issue on forensic DNA methodology and identification of people, and application of forensic methodology, DNA methodology and identification in general, or crime scene assessment and so on. And it was really very good for us, because it was a new field where they produced a lot of good data. It was a technologically kind of prominent field and rapidly developing field, where people produced a lot of data, but they didn't have enough outlets to publish them. There were a few forensic medicine journals that would publish such data. They would go to genetic journals, and so they had a lot of publications which they had to publish somewhere. And we were lucky to kind of offer this opportunity for them, and we kind of specialized for that type of theme issues. We also had different theme issues when people would come with conferences, and they were always very successful. Because we didn't publish everything on a conference. So we always had a firm arrangement at the beginning that we're going to publish only what we think is good. So not everybody on a conference would publish it in the journal, but it will go through a strict peer review process, and we would publish only the best presentations from that conference. I think that's a very good source of good authors and good publications, because people are anyway presenting something, and they're preparing their presentations for a conference, and that's a good way to make arrangements. And they like to see the work from a conference in one place, because then they can show it to other colleagues. That's something they're proud of. Again, I think you can look for the Balkan Medical Journal outside of the country, the whole region. So I think it's everywhere, like in everything else in human life and in science too. Everything is about networking, knowing people, asking people. For example, we once published an article from Garfield, Eugene Garfield, who invented the impact factor. I met him on a conference on peer review once, and asked him, would you like to write a paper for Croatian Medical Journal? I said, yes, I will. And he sent a paper in a few months. So, and these things are kind of building up, and the more you publish these things, it's like a snowball. You start with small things, and it starts rolling, and you get into the big thing. There is probably a large Turkish diaspora, people from Turkey working and living abroad in medicine and in science. So you can also ask them and say, okay, come on, give me you produce a lot of research somewhere in the United States or somewhere, give me a piece of your data and publish it in our journal. It's important for Turkey, for the Balkans, and let's go for it. I think you always have to touch a bit of a kind of a national pride and so on. Then again, just like we discussed yesterday, that very often when you are a reviewer for a journal, when you send your paper to a journal and they may even reject it, they will ask to be a reviewer. So when people, say, oh, I read your paper, then you have a paper in your journal, you can ask them, will you write something for us? Maybe reviewers, when they review for your journal, they will also look at, maybe they will be happy with what they reviewed, and then you may ask them to write for your journal and so on and so on. You have a large editorial board membership, so they should publish something. I think that's also a good way that you ask them, especially now that you lifted your ban on publishing for the editorial board. I think you can, they can contribute a paper every 2 years or every 3 years, and even with that, you would have a kind of a pool of papers that would be helpful for you. So I think it just, whatever you think and whatever works for your journal is the best way to approach authors and to get papers for them. And sometimes, when I look back at our experience in the Croatian Medical Journal, it was different times, it was the times of war, and we really did work a lot with our authors. Sometimes they would come from the battlefields with just kind of sheets of paper with some data. We would help them organize that. We would help them when they had first drafts of their paper, and they really appreciated that. And very often they would come back and say, oh, I have some new good data. So it was kind of a continuous source of good contributions to the journal. And as I say, this kind of author helpful policy is something that worked for us and that brought us a lot of good papers. We published about this policy that that we get an author that doesn't know how to present research well. They have done a nice study, but they are not skillful in writing, data presentation, and so on and so on. And in the beginning, we called our policy author-friendly policy. And one of our colleagues from the States, Ed Hute, who is in the United States called the Dean of Medical Journals, because he was very crucial in kind of getting the journals together in the Council of Science Editors. He said, no, this is not helpful, this is not friendly policy, because you're often not friendly to them, because you criticize them and you tell them to do things that should be done and not how they would like it to have been done. And he said this should be called a author helpful policy. So we do kind of follow authors and work with them during the presentation, during the whole process of writing. When I look back now, I'm not sure whether it's a good thing, because for me it's frustrating that you help someone write something and then next time they come they have the same problem. So very often they don't learn much from the work with the editor, but just kind of expect that they will be helped and they don't invest anything in it. I sometimes think that we should charge it, because when people pay for something, then they appreciate that, at least in the Balkans, at least in Croatia, but I'm sure that it's everywhere else. When you give something for free to people, they often do not appreciate it. And for example, Ksenia's boss, Professor Petrovečki, who used to be our first research integrity editor, he said, yeah, it's very easy for them, because when they come to me, Matko just says, my husband, okay, I'll talk to you, Mladen will do all the statistics and Anna will write your paper, no worries. But we, over time, that was a benefit only for the war papers, and later on we became much more strict with our editors and with our authors and the papers that we got there. So I think you shouldn't be, as an editor, be ashamed when you go to a conference to invite authors to your journal. They may give some interesting talk at conferences. For example, Ksenia was talking about plagiarism in Turkish Croats and Chinese people submitting to Croatian Medical Journal. Maybe she can present, some kind of subgroup assessment of Turkish, of plagiarism in Turkish authors to your journal or something. Or when you have articles that you read somewhere and you may know the author and you can write to them. And it doesn't always have to be an original article, because as we have seen, sometimes editorial commentaries and essays may bring citations, and they are good for you because they don't count to as a factor or number that is included in the impact factor. And finally, here in capital letters, D issues. They are very useful. They shouldn't be supplements, and they can really increase the visibility and the recognition of your journal.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the essay and the article and
But original scientific article would have original data. Essay could be, you know, the problems of publishing integrity in Turkey. We used to have different types of essays in Croatian Medical Journal. We had kind of a column type of thing where we had some people who liked writing and they would write a column for each or a small essay for each of the issues.
difference between editorial and essay?
Editorial is written by editors or guest editors, somebody who is invited to, and it's published at the front of the journal. And commentaries, you know, depends on how your journal is organized. For example, in the Lancet and BMJ, they divide the content of their journal into what they call a first half and second half. First half is all the news, you know, when you open Lancet, you have the editorial, then commentaries, news, and so on. Everything that is not original research, and then they have original research. And then in the back, they have the back section with the history and book reviews and other things. The same with BMJ. They have this first part, which is kind of news type of thing, or commentaries, and then the research part. And it's very similar in JAMA and New England Journal of Medicine. This is a typical organization of these journals. So whatever is not an original article, it depends, you know, how you classify it. You can have commentaries in the beginning, before the article starts, and in the back you may have essays or different types of contributions. So it's up to the journal how you organize. There is no strict rule how these things are organized.
What about essays, effect of impact factors?
Yeah, that's an essay. It can be a commentary or an essay. Depends how you do it, because commentaries may differ, and essays, you may have a series of essays on a topic. For example, we had a person from Africa writing about health problems in Africa, and then he wrote a column for every issue, and it was called My Africa. There was his picture, and it was his essay. Or we had, you know, somebody from the microbiology, he was a parasitologist, he liked to write about infectious diseases, so he wrote a column, Let's Get Something Straight. And then he published his essays. And what was good about that, because it kind of increased the visibility of the journal, because in the end, when they would be publishing this for several years, we would publish a little book. It was our Croatian Medical Journal edition of books, and everybody liked getting them, and it was our present to the reviewers, and it was actually nice books. For example, we published a book on peace and medicine about how health research and healthcare and how health workers can contribute to peace. It was written by a kind of human rights activist who wrote a series of essays on their experiences in peace and human rights. Yeah.
You can republish.
Yeah, you can republish it. May I turn this heating off, because it's really hot. At least not here. I think I turned it off. So yes, I mean, you can kind of go further a bit into publishing adventure and kind of do all these little things that take some time, but you know, I think that we go into an editorial business because we like publishing, we like words, and it's kind of growing up of your journal. But I think what is most important for authors is your communication with them. That you have a clear guidance of what is expected and clear information on the processes in the journal, you know, information on peer review process, editorial decisions, what happens if there are problems, what happens if there is a problem with the integrity of what is published, and so on and so on. Of course, you know, at least at this moment, although there is a lot of movement and action towards opening the whole process, confidentiality is also important. The peer review is considered a confidential process, and you as editor reviewers in their role, and the authors are not supposed to talk about the peer review process and decision during this process. As I say, in medicine this is now changing. You have open peer review. We discussed it yesterday, where some journals, like the Biomed Central journals, I don't know, some pilot journals in Springer, they open the whole process. So you sign your review, it's published after the article is accepted, and so on and so on. And it even now goes a bit further, because the new journal from Faculty of Science, you probably know Faculty of Science action by the open access proponents, and they gathered now more than 10,000 researchers who read papers and grade them and present their marks and commentaries on papers. They kind of selecting it for their colleagues, the best of research that was published somewhere. So they started to publish their own journal called F1000. And they have what is called a post-publication peer review. That doesn't mean that they publish and then everybody peer reviews, but the paper is published when it is received by the journal. If it satisfies the basic criteria, you know, how the tables are structured, and that it's not, you know, some silly thing that is completely bogus, but they publish it and then they review it, okay? And it's already published, you have a DOI, so it's complete publication, but then it is fully published. That means that it receives a seal, but it has 2 positive peer reviews, which are also openly published online. And it can go through different processes or different rounds of peer review. They are posting new versions, and the last version, where the editors and the peer review are satisfied with, is considered the final publication and definite publication of the journal. So these are new developments in peer review and publication process, where confidentiality is not important. But you know, it requires.
What's your opinion about it? What are the advantages of this peer review process, or disadvantages?
The first advantage is that you have a published paper right away. You send the paper to the journal. They check it in a couple of days, it's published.
I mean, for the journal, not for authors.
For the journal, first of all, this is an open access journal which charges article processing fee. So you pay, but you know, you pay and your article is online and it gets improved. It's kind of a copy from what is very common in physics. In physics, they have this archive, which is a repository of papers, but everybody in physics is publishing there. So it's not a journal, you can publish it there, people comment on your article, you may change it, and it may stay published in archive, and it's a publication, so you can cite journals or articles from archive, but it can also be published anywhere else in any other journal. So you're kind of depositing your article in an open repository, people are commenting, you are revising it, and then you can send it to journals and journals will accept it. Although, you know, by definition, this was already published. But it's a custom in physics and in molecular biology and genetics that papers put in there and kind of openly peer reviewed by people can be published elsewhere. And the moment you publish it in the archives, it's yours. You keep the intellectual property of that journal, and it's your discovery. Nobody can say, oh yes, but I published first in the journal. If you publish first in archive, you still hold the intellectual rights to your discovery, which is very important for some fields. For example, F1000, a lot of people from kind of rapidly developing fields in molecular biology or molecular genetics, where it's important to take, you know, the primacy of the discovery, want to publish it as fast as possible, because in many areas peer reviewers can hold it back, you know, because they are your competitors. You know, they don't answer the peer review request, you know, they delay and so on and so on. By the time they do their work and they publish it somewhere else. There is a lot of pressures, not only in publishing, but also in peer review. So they know that, especially if their discovery is against the current dogma. And we know that in peer review, there is a lot of confirmatory bias. Peer reviewer reviewers give better recommendations for papers that go along the current dogma, so what we think we know. If they go against the current knowledge and current state of knowledge in the field, they have a lesser chance of getting a positive recommendation in peer review. And it is a well-known, experimentally proven fact. So people just want to publish first, and that's the benefit for authors.
But it seems that it is not very possible for medical journals, isn't it? Medical field.
Ooh, it is possible, why not? I mean,
Sorry.
F1000 publishes also medical research.
Is there a risk for retraction? Say some reviewer checked and found a very big methodological problem and says that it cannot be published because of this. So, but it's already published.
Okay, it's already published, but what I say is that you can change it. You can
But
go
you cannot
to-
change the methodology. So if this methodology is wrong,
You will repeat the methodology. It will take you 2 years to get there, and you will. But that will be only the first version. Your second version will be in a year, and it will take another. It's all transparent as long as we know what happened. It's very new, so we'll see how it develops and whether authors like it. But some fields are very happy with that solution. But let's follow. And again, I think what authors like is that they get a clear editorial decision, you know, that, and I know that for us as authors, sometimes we don't understand what the editors tells us, you know, when they say, oh, it's not acceptable in the present form, but if you submit it in a revised form, we would be willing to consider it. Many authors often think that it's a rejection. But if you get that answer from an editor, you know that it's a revise and resubmit, which is a good thing, and that you have a chance. So I think it's very important to convey your editorial decisions in a clear way. And again, that you provide clear information on the publication process. So what is expected of the author, how long will it take to get published, what is the planned issue where their article is going to be published, whether you are going to work, whether you're going to edit the language or the presentation and so on, whether there will be some other requirements from the author after the paper is accepted, which happens. For example, in our journal, we want to make a uniform style, we may reorder tables, we may rewrite the paper so that it follows the style of the journal. And it is possible. I mean, if you don't have resource and if you don't have language editing, you cannot do that. But if you do have, it's very helpful for authors. And big journals really do that. For example, JAMA, Lancet, they rewrite all the articles from all the authors. I remember when my research fellow, his PhD was on, mentoring, and we did a systematic review of mentoring interventions in medicine, and we published it in JAMA. It was his PhD, and he spent a lot of time on that. And then when we got the editorial comments back, he said, they know my paper better than me, because they saw all the mistakes in numbers that I made, and they all found it, they all corrected it. It was really, a really thorough job that some journals are doing. And just a reminder here, what is important about editorial decisions. These are some quotes from Cope papers, guidance on editorial work, that your decision should be based on the paper's importance, originality and clarity, because language is what can be improved. And it also has to be the study's relevance to limit all the aims and the niche and the framework of the journal. Okay, so what you said about methodology, and what if a reviewer discovers something that methodology is wrong? Very often we see that at the level of editorial decision, and this should be caught. For example, in the case of F1000, the editors should see that there is something really crucially wrong with the methodology and say, we're not going to publish that before you correct this. And very often, our experience was that language and style was the least of problems, because this is something that you can correct easily, more or less easily. But the greatest problem is that we get papers where the methodology is completely wrong, where they have a hypothesis and their question should be answered by a completely different methodology. For example, they ask a question about risk factors and so on, and they do a survey, whereas it would be at least good to have a case control study. But very often our colleagues do not have enough knowledge from research methodology and study design to help them in doing research better. And once the research is done, it's very difficult to undo this. And sometimes the data are not useful because they are not done in a way that would really make the results relevant and useful. And now we get to peer review, and we're going to spend a little bit more time with peer review and the questions we ask about peer review and how we find and how to deal with the reviewers, how to obtain better performance, what as an editor should I do when I get completely different opinions about the same paper, and this happens, and this relates to what we discussed yesterday, that a letter to the editor after the peer review process should also have editorial comments. So you as an editor have to read the reviewer's comments and see what is important. Sometimes reviewers may ask something that is impossible to do. So you may choose as an editor to say, the reviewer too is asking for this, but we consider that it's not relevant for this submission and the publication in our journal, so you don't have to, please do not fully consider either this comment or address it in the limitation sections, but you're not required to do new experiments or something. So you have the right to, not to modify it, but you have to write to direct the author in view of the reviewer's comments and your decision. Very often I hear it from, for example, social scientists. In social sciences, they always send the article to 3 reviewers so that you have an odd number of reviewers, and it's a voting of reviewers that gets your paper accepted. The editors often think that they don't have anything to say in their decision about publication, which I think is wrong. In biomedicine, the editor is the one who makes a decision, because he or she knows what their journal is about, what they want for their journal, and whatever the reviewers say. Sometimes, usually, you wouldn't send a paper that you know you don't like out for review, but it may sometimes happen that the reviewers say, okay, it's fine, but you know you have maybe just published a similar paper, or you know that this is not good for your journal, so you may say, and in the end reject it, even though the reviewers recommend publication. Okay, so it's up to you to make a final decision, to choose and direct the author what to follow from reviewers' comments. Of course, you have to show usually people ask, so what do I do if there is something in the reviewers' comments that I would like to be deleted, or sometimes when the reviewers are not using a nice language, sometimes they say, oh, these authors are stupid and they didn't do a proper thing, which sometimes you do find. First of all, the reviewers should know that this type of language and this type of communication is not proper for the journal and for a peer review process. And on the other hand, you as an editor, I think you can edit such words, but in general, you are not supposed to take out comments from the reviewers. Even if you think that the author doesn't need to follow some recommendation, you have to keep the whole commentary of a peer reviewer. And you can say, please disregard the comment of reviewer 2, comment number 3 of reviewer 2. Please pay careful attention to what the reviewer 1 is suggesting. Okay? So you can choose from what a reviewer said and then present it as your requirement to authors, but leaving the reviewers' comments intact as they are. Okay, unless it's really inflammatory words and somebody saying that somebody's stupid. So, yeah.
I had sometimes difficulty that the reviewer said that this paper cannot be accepted in this journal, or the paper is acceptable, can be published. Even they say can be published in the journal. So, but I look at the review, there is no comments, only small things. And then I don't want to send this sentence to the...
So that sentence is to you, so it's a comment to the editor, it's
but
not comment
he
to
put
the author.
it in the outer comments section.
That you can definitely take out because it's his recommendation. But the recommendations are to you, not to the author. So
We
you
can take the
you can
recommendation
take
sentences.
Yeah. If they may if they say, I think that this paper has a lot of problems and in the present form is not publishable, that's fine. But if they say, this paper shouldn't be published, that's a recommendation to you, and especially if you have a different opinion, you think that it can be published after adequate revision, then you take that sentence out. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I find it difficult sometimes they send recommendation without comments. And this is actually not helping the editor to make its decision. Because if you do receive from both reviewers, or sometimes 3 reviewers, if it is an interdisciplinary topic that you want to be checked by different medical specialties, and you don't have a feedback of information regarding the weaknesses and the strengths of the paper, then you cannot make a decision. You have to go through and do the peer review yourself, which is time consuming. So what we did, we introduced, besides the spaces we have in the review form for blank spaces for them to put their comments confidentially to the author, to the editor, and open to the author. We put an area where the reviewer has to tick some questions regarding adding new knowledge, adequate statistics, presentation quality, and kind of we can use this information to build up a little bit of abstract of reviewers' comments. The second one I would like to introduce to the discussion, some journals do actually have a second round of review that they're actually presenting all reviewers' comments to the reviewers, blindly anonymous. So actually you make your review and then you see the review that Cem did or somebody else, and actually you reform your review depending on what other reviewers have already been introduced to the discussion and the criticism of the paper. Do you think that this adds to the peer review process, or do you think that this has some bias?
No, I think it's fine. Let me just first comment on your first suggestion. Yes, I mean, it depends on the journal how you do it. If the recommendation to the editor is published because it's a good paper and they don't have any comments, that's okay. But if they say this paper shouldn't be published or it needs revision and they don't give any comments, that's completely useless. So, if the study is good and they like it, you may just write to the author that the reviewer 1 liked the paper and didn't have any comments, but the reviewer 2 had comments, and so on and so on. So in some cases it's okay if it is positive, but if it's negative recommendation and they don't provide any comments, you can either write back to that reviewer and say, you suggested rejection or major revision, could you please indicate the points, for revision, and which would be helpful to the author, because that's not a good reviewer. I don't think that you should call that reviewer again to review. Or you can, but then again you have to format your submission or review system that they really cannot move from that page if it is online if they don't check and click at least what you said, 5 questions about the paper, and then you can format that into their answer. It's all about how much technology and how much you're going to invest into that, and very often the editor has to read the whole paper to see. But and what you said about kind of a feedback and sharing of reviews among reviews, especially during the second round, it's very useful. But again, you need to have a kind of a system where you can put them together and send them to all the reviewers and so on. Some journals have it. Biomed Central, again, whenever they send a paper for revision and you see it again, you see all the other reviews. So you can say,
we do that, but electronically some journals actually introduce you to the pool of thoughts of all reviewers. They actually It's one of the ISRM scholarly editions from Hindawi that introduce you to a site where you can see all 4, because they sent to 4 reviewers. All 4 reviewers.
But that's during the second revision.
That during the second revision,
Yeah,
but
many journals
it's actually, you have to click that to see them and then form your own decision.
Oh, okay.
So it's a kind of a compulsory step that you have to go through it, and I think, is it offering something or is it introducing a bias? Because
No, I think it's offering because, do you see the response of authors to the reviewers?
No.
No?
But you see well, this actually journal does not support revision. It's either acceptance as it is or rejection. It doesn't have a revision step. So if you actually make comments and then you see the comments of other reviewers, you might alter your final decision.
But who is the first? What about the first person who is reviewing? So somebody has to be first, and he's making his comments without knowing what the other was. Only the ones that are coming.
Everybody does without knowing. We are all first. All 4.
Yeah. But then afterwards you see.
Afterwards you see.
And then you can modify your.
You can modify.
Yeah. Okay, it's fine if it works for the journal. It's nice to have a small research to test whether it's better than the other.
From the methodology point of view, is my question. I mean, we usually do the letter to the reviewers regarding the revised version of the manuscript. We introduce all the commentary blinded, and then we attach to that the letter that it's compulsory for the authors to write a letter answering all the comments, and we send them together to all the reviewers. To the reviewers that demanding revision, because if they accept it from the first round and one demands some revision, we send it only to the one saying that there is a need for revision.
So it could be. Yeah, if you think it will work for your journal, it's better to try.
All right.
So so you have. Just want to say that we usually think about. External revision is the only one that can be done, but different journals have different systems. For example, Gemma and Lescent review it in-house, so the editors get together, everybody needs to read the paper and then make decisions on what they're going to send out and so on. So they use a combination of in-house by the editorial board and their office, and also external members. B&J used to review all its papers in-house. They had what is called a hanging committee, but not a hanging, as a real hanging that you kill papers, but it was kind of analogous of a hanging committee in a British gallery, where they would make a decision on which pictures would get hung for the exhibition. So that was the hanging committee. And rather late in there, I mean, it was like 20 years ago, but still they then only started having external experts. For example, Circulation, one of the major cardiovascular journals, has only reviews by the editorial board. They have a large editorial board, and they are reviewing only by the editorial board, in contrast to American, the Green Journal. They have only external review. So it depends. I think from a point of view of a small journal, I think that in-house and external review is best, because you have to use your editorial board somehow. They can serve as good reviewers because they probably know the situation about the journal, they know your authors and the topics that you want to publish, and they know what is important for your journal, and they can provide some review. So a combination of in-house and external review, I think, is useful. We talked about this, and we're not going to spend more time on that, because usually what we often use is this traditional single blind, where author's identity is known to the reviewer, but the authors do not know the identity of the reviewer. But the movement towards open peer review is something that is kind of happening in biomedicine. How to find reviewers? Again, there you start with your friends, your citizens, your countrymen. You build up your journal's database. members of today's meeting, are you in future? There is something, Ksenia may tell more about that because that's also used for plagiarism, because you can find similarities in text. But ET Blast engine is again a useful engine. I don't know whether it's functional anymore, because sometimes, it functions and it
not
doesn't.
functional, and that is why I'm not showing it online.
But it used to be a good source, and it was developed for the purpose of identifying reviewers. You put the abstract of the paper in this little engine. It's an online interface. You put it in there, and then it retrieves similar abstract, similar topics from PubMed. And in that way you can see who the researchers are in this field, and you can use them as your reviewers, because you can find the address on PubMed and so on and so on. But as I say, of course, that's a way how you discover plagiarism. You put in the abstract of your author and you find identical publication of your authors and so on and so on. And that's why it was used to develop a database of duplication or similarities in PubMed, which is called Deja Vu database. I don't know whether it's functional anymore.
Deja Vu is really a great base, really large, but only for 2% of articles are manually verified. This is why it can be very misleading. You were in Deja Vu.
Yeah, because once we retracted the paper because of Deja Vu, we got at some point they wrote to many journals and said we have discovered identical papers, and that's how we
Claire Francis. That's the person who has identity as Claire Francis writes to the journals.
No, we had a letter from Skip Garner who said there was a publication. This is their case in which we had to retract. And then, when you get such a letter, you say, okay, let me see myself in Deja Vu. And then I discovered 2 papers with duplication with my name on. One was a secondary publication where we published guidelines for reviewers in Croatian Medical Journal, and it was translated in Croatian and published in the journal in Croatian, and it said that, it was originally published in Croatian Medical Journal. So they said, okay, this is resolved and this is not a duplication. It was verified. But the other case was where my colleague, with whom I published a paper from orthopedics, she wrote a second paper with the same data and published it in a Croatian journal, indexed in PubMed in English, with only her name. So it was a true duplication. So I wrote to her, she didn't ever answer. I said, you could have asked, And I think she thought, because it was a conference paper, she thought it was okay to publish it as a conference paper, but with the same data, probably they wouldn't be discovered as plagiarism, because she put all the numbers from tables into text. And the paper was rejected because the journal reacted very nicely. They wrote an editorial about how this is not appropriate and so on and so on. So it's very useful.
I checked it 2 years ago for Turkish papers, and they checked it I think a few weeks ago again. It's totally the same numbers.
Yes.
I think they stopped searching.
Yeah, I think they are not adding things to true. And then, as again we discussed that yesterday, it can be reviewers suggested by authors. But as I say, research shows that it's okay to have reviewers suggested by authors, and you can add them to your database, but you should know that they would have a more positive recommendation than the reviewers that you will choose for yourself. Okay, this is something that is useful because it says you find expert, find journal. So it could be used as a good source of peer reviewers, but unfortunately they don't have any funding, I think, anymore. So it's not as useful as it used to be. So now,
Sorry, maybe we can do it with Authenticate.
maybe.
They also give some references.
But this is free and used only to find people.
We have free Authenticate, so
Yes, but it's a waste.
Okay, maybe you can. Yeah. But does it really lead you to
It's-
PubMed? Because PubMed would have more information about the authors and contact addresses, and here you will
And
just
this software doesn't search only text similarity in text. It has some different algorithm than Authenticate, so it searches
And more useful.
through titles and keywords like PubMed. So maybe it's really.
Maybe we have to compare.
I did compare. It's not useful for plagiarism detection, so useful as Authenticate, but it is useful to find similar.
Our scholar
Yes,
also
similar
has
things.
about this. When we put the keywords, we can choose the keywords there on the table, and we can search on PubMed, Google, or some other.
Okay, that's useful.
Through
Then it's worth the money you're paying for scholars. And I'm just now going to go through some evidence. I always like to, when I talk, to base on evidence. So this is some research about different aspects of peer review. So these are the two studies about peer reviewers suggested by authors or picked by editors, and one of them was done in. The first one was a randomized trials actually done in BMJ, and the other one was a retrospective study where raters were blinded in Biomed Central. Editors and the two studies, using different methodological approaches, came to the same conclusions, that the quality of review is the same, but that the author suggested reviewers significantly often recommend more positive outcome for the manuscript than the reviewers chosen by the author. So unfortunately, it doesn't work. For example, this is the most recent paper on peer review, where they looked at what was the impact of peer review of reports on randomized trials published in open peer review journals. So they went to Biomed Central and looked at what the reviewers, how the paper looked before the reviewers saw it, and then how they looked after the reviewers saw it, and what they found, and I'm just presenting here their conclusion, is that peer reviewers failed to detect important deficiencies in reporting of the methods as results of randomized trials. And which is kind of really disappointing, because we have CONSORT, which is a reporting guideline for randomized controlled trials from 1994, 96. It has been around for a long time. There are even now systematic reviews on the effectiveness of CONSORT as a reporting guideline, showing that it improves. But still, after so many years of having the tools for better reporting, we still cannot get it, and the peer reviewers are not using it. Okay? They also said that the number of changes that would improve, and this was done by methodology, these are all Cochrane people from UK and from France. The number of changes requested by peer reviewers were relatively small, and although they have a positive impact, some of the reviewers' comments were inappropriate and would actually decrease the quality of reporting in the final presentation. So unfortunately, and this will be true for many of the studies I'm going to show, we have problems with peer review, and it doesn't work the way we want it to work, and what is even worse, you cannot teach people how to peer review well, because all the studies on training peer reviewers actually failed. These are they're quite old studies, but I think they are valid still. One was from the Annals of Internal Medicine, when the Fletchers, the husband and wife, when they were editors-in-chief, and the other one is from the BMJ. They looked at what are the characteristics of peer reviewers, those who produce good quality reviews. So they found out, at least in the States, so this is biased geographically, that they are young, they are from strong academic institutions, so that means from strong, big hospitals or research universities. They are known to the editors, so the friends I know who are going to, that I know that are reliable, and also when they are blinded to the identity of the manuscript authors, probably because they are young. So they then are not scared to review a paper from a big professor. Okay, and the same study was done in BMJ, so this is more kind of a European bias, when they also checked the quality of peer review for BMJ, and again, they couldn't say exactly who was the best reviewer who produced quality reviews. They said that maybe those who spend more time, like more than 3 hours of review, but they said that it doesn't increase the quality of review when the editors and authors rate. So again, we don't know what are the best peer reviewers. And now a series of studies which were mostly done in Annals of Emergency Medicine by Mike Callahan, who really for years he did a number of different methodological approaches for testing, training of peer review. So he first worked on structured workshop training. So he had workshop training for peer reviewers, and then he looked at the subsequent performance of journal peer reviewers, and he didn't succeed. He said efforts to recruit average reviewers to a second workshop were time-consuming, had low success rate, and showed a similar lack of effects on ratings, despite improvements in scores on the test instrument. Workshop teaching formats, although traditional, are of unproven efficacy. So, workshops don't work. So, what if you have previous training and if you have experience of journal reviewers, how does it affect review quality? Again, this was done later on, published in PLOS Medicine, and they found that there is no easily identifiable types of form of training or experience that predict reviewer performance. Okay? Skill in scientific peer review may be as ill-defined and hard to impart as is common sense. So this is the reason, for example, why I'm now a member of kind of a networking research action of COST funded by the EU about peer review, but in different disciplines. And I think that the best way we will learn more about peer review if we use qualitative approach. What it is about peer review? What is this, when you, as a peer reviewer, you see a paper, and I think it's very often like when I'm examining students and I know what I'm going to give them after their first question. I have to go through all the 7 questions, from anatomy, but I already know, because it's not intuition, it's just the kind of experience and knowledge that is already subconscious. I already know what the mark they're going to get. Like here, you look at the paper and you know what you're going to do. So what is this common sense and how we make decisions, and what is the aspect of rationality in it, and so on and so on. I think we're approaching peer review and decisions in peer review from a wrong point of view. I don't think that quantitative and hypothesis testing are appropriate now because we don't know which hypothesis we should think about and talk about. So it's impossible to predict the quality of peer review based on the characteristics and experience of peer reviewers that they already had. Then again, they did a study of longitudinal trends. So they did a kind of a cohort study and followed their peer reviewers. And again, they found out they couldn't find anything, and that in their journal, most of their peer reviewers received lower quality scores for article assessment over the years. So they don't improve as they review for a journal, but they decrease the quality of what they do for you. So again, how do you address that? And then another one, this is from 2012, does mentoring new peer reviewers improve review quality? No. So they did a randomized trial, and they said that when they had the structured training intervention of pairing new young peer reviewers with experienced peer reviewers, did not improve the quality of the subsequent.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You gave 2 examples several minutes ago that one journal was using internal review only, another journal uses external reviewer only. Is there any differences about the quality of review?
It wasn't looked at. There wasn't study because for that you will need to have that kind of collaboration with journals.
We can compare it because maybe 80% of papers are rejected by our editorial board. So maybe some journals who have smaller rates, we can compare if you do.
Sure.
It,
We once did a comparison because we use the similar forms as the Lancet, and we once did a study comparison peer review between British Medical Journal and the Lancet, like a small and big journal.
Yes.
We got access to Lancet peer reviews and we combined it, and we didn't find many differences. So difficult, yeah. Then again, this is another one from Journal of Clinical Epidemiology. That even the editors cannot be trained. So they looked at editors of major clinical medical journals and they asked them what they know, and they reported training in medical editing topics, so ethical issues regularly. So they said, I know, but when they actually questioned their knowledge of 4 common and well-disseminated publication ethics topics, they didn't perform well. And this is very similar to another study where they asked, it was done by Liz Wager and other people, but they asked Blackwell editors about publication integrity problems, and they all said, oh, I know everything, it's not a problem, although authorship is not a problem, this is not a problem, although there is evidence that there are problems.
1% of them were worried about publication, falsification, and plagiarism.
So it's...
But it doesn't mean that editors should not receive workshop.
Sorry?
Editorial education should be useful.
I mean, but it's not. They I don't know, maybe it's for the level of American journal editors, maybe it's higher. We still need to reach the kind of basic things. So they say they have training, but actually when they have to answer questions about publication ethics topics, they don't know how to do it. Again, so that we don't think that it's only for anesthesiology journal or emergency medicine journal, and poor Mike Halligan, he actually gave up doing these studies. I remember seeing him, I kept seeing him on peer review conference, and in the end he said, you know, I don't want to do this research anymore because nothing works. So in BMJ they did a randomized controlled trial to see the effect of training on the quality of peer review. They have a tool for editors. They give quality assessment of all the peer reviews. This was done very thoroughly with them. It's a validated instrument, really, you know, from a psychological point of view, a psychometrics point of view, it is a really good tool. But again, when they had short training packages for their reviewer, there was only slight impact on peer review. Something that is kind of not worth all the effort of training and spending so much money if there is a almost non-significant increase in the quality of the peer review. And then there is another study from BMJ, and they did a study here where they sent a paper to peer reviewers where they deliberately introduced mistakes, errors. Okay, the editors thought that these errors are obvious and that everybody should see them. And when they sent it to the reviewers, they saw, I think, 3 out of 8 errors that editors thought that they were blatant and, you know, very clear for everybody. So the conclusion was that they are not good at detecting problems in papers. And training packages had only slight impact on error detection. So then even if you train them what are errors and how they can be detected, they didn't do it well.
So
the logical questions, I don't know, maybe if you remember, how did they resolve ethical problems with this investigation? Because they were misleading the reviewers, wasting their time.
This is what we do. You know that we do a lot of research in Croatian medical journals, that we did a lot of research. And this is what we actually copied from Lancet declaration page and authorship and copyright information. So we asked them to sign or check with us if they don't want to be a part of editorial research. So all our authors sign an informed consent to be a part of the research. Yeah, but you also have a form for reviewers where they agree. Okay, so it's kind of optional. So it was very smart to put, because we are doing in order to improve the quality of editorial work in our journal. We are performing on a time based from time to time. We perform different studies to assess and improve the peer review process and editorial work. And if you do not want to be a part of this research, please contact the editorial office. As you know, nobody...
in psychology, they often after that have some kind of debriefing, explanation, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they did. Sarah Schroeter, the first author, is a psychologist who is employed by the BMJ to do research. Only also, not now anymore, she says she's now doing more kind of marketing study.
Did you explain them afterwards,
yeah.
after they have completed this, I don't know, fake reviews or something like that?
I think they didn't do that in this case, but if what you suggest is, would be very useful. We would learn more about the problem.
We didn't ask such permission to our reviews, so that means that we cannot do such a study.
But you introduce it from now on, and then, I mean, you can still evaluate the peer review process. You cannot do experiments. So you can
do that just.
Yeah, you can do and analyze your peer review process and present it, but you cannot do, because we did randomized trials with authorship forms and so on. So for that you need to have informed consent, and you cannot tell them what the study is about. That's why we have this general comment, because otherwise, if we told them, then the results will not be the same. And also, BMJ also tried to open versus closed peer review, and they were hoping to see, benefits of open peer review that is going to be better. They did a randomized controlled trial, and it didn't show that it makes any difference. The reviewers give the same recommendations, and the quality of their review is same. So there is no actual benefit of open peer review versus the closed peer review, except that it's more transparent. And they opted for open peer review because they said, although we couldn't confirm the quality of it, we think it's increasing transparency, and that's why we decided to have open peer review. Or, for example, when they did a study in a smaller journal, so this is in the Danish medical journal, which was published in Danish, and they looked at open peer review in their journal, so not in a big medical journal like the BMJ, and this didn't improve review quality, but it caused the reviewers to decline the review. So for a small journal that already has problems with peer reviewers, introducing open peer review may even reduce the pool of reviewers, and that, I think, in turn may affect the quality of it. And then again, if you wanted a specialty journal, this is a dermatology journal again, when the blinding during peer review does not appear to affect the disposition of the manuscript. So again, no difference in open versus blind peer review. And then again, what you asked, cooperation between referees and authors increases peer review accuracy. So when they did a study in open access journals, and they found out that referees and authors who participated in open interaction, because it was open process and everybody knew identity, they had 11% higher reviewing accuracy rates. That cooperation in the peer review process can lead to decreasing risks of reviewing errors. And this is sometimes, although for journals who have blinded peer review or single blind peer review, very often when the reviewer has important suggestion, we then ask the peer reviewer, would it be okay if we put you in contact with your author? Because you can work directly, and we know that they can collaborate. They may be from similar institutions, talk similar languages, or they may be willing to cooperate even from another country. And very often this collaboration increases the quality of what we get in the end, as long as everybody consents to it. You cannot reveal identity of a reviewer if it is confidence. So does using reporting guidelines during peer review improve the quality of final manuscripts submitted to a biomedical journal? It was done in a Spanish journal, was published in the BMJ. They said that additional reviews, so if you do extra reviews based on the reporting guidelines, improve manuscript quality, but the observed effect was small and not really definitely demonstrated. So there was a small improvement, not significant as they expected from it. And authors, they said that they found that authors adhere more to suggestion from conventional review than those from additional review. So the article passed normal peer review, and then the authors were asked to perform some additional corrections under peer review, and that was not as successful. And again, what I told about that, now we have a systematic review of effects of consort as an intervention to improve reporting of RCTs, and they are improving. It's not as they would like to see. There is some change, but there is much more room for improvement. Of this one, whether statistical reviews improve reporting of medical trials, and this is where we have positive results. So statistical review in a randomized controlled study setting improves the positive effect of adding a statistical reviewer to the field expert peers in improving manuscript quality. Okay? So this means, and this is the reason actually before this was published, that we introduced the statistical editor, the statistical reviewer. Everything that has numbers in it has to be checked also additionally by a statistical editor who will check the appropriateness of study design and the statistical analysis. So again, there should be a collaboration between editors and reviewers. Good resources are, for example, the resources for reviewers of BMJ, very detailed, very nice, and you can take, you already have your peer review guidelines in the Balkan medical journals. We also published, and I think it's good because it tells your reviewers what you want as a specific journal from them. And for example, people usually say, why should I peer review for you? Because it's your obligation, you are having the benefit of increasing your knowledge, and you also have the satisfaction of science debate, exchange of information, and so on. Oh, thank you. I think
I'm thinking that payment for peer review process can be a very good way to improve the quality of the peer review, because if I have, for example, 10 reviewers that I really rely on, and I know them that they are really making good reviews for the articles, I can make agreement with them, and I can say them that we will make payment like this to you for each article, this much money, and you will return your review at most in 1 week, for example. And they will make good reviews because I know and I rely on their scientific knowledge and experience. And we can get good results. What do you think about the payment for peer review process?
I mean, if you can afford it, it's fine, but I think it creates a lot of administrative process. How are you going to pay reviewers outside of Turkey? What is enough, what is a good payment, How much would someone in the United States want to be paid, or would they even want to go through a hustle of receiving a small amount in some currency or something? I think it creates, it can be done internally. I think it would be much better to pay someone to, statistician, for example, to look at every paper and ensure that it's done well, at least from the review. But when you have a large pool of authors or reviewers around the world, how are you going to manage all the
okay,
banking
I'm not
accounts
talking about a large pool. For example, I'm a pathologist and I'm section editor for about pathology of this journal, and I can find 10 really good peer reviewers.
Okay, but can the other section editors?
The others also can find their reviewers. And
yeah, but okay, it's okay if you find 10 from Turkey, but what about the others who are outside of Turkey and it's difficult to pay? One has to think about the whole process. I think you'd rather give them some token, coupon to buy books or something like that, than to have money involved. For example, I wouldn't want to get money because then do I have to pay VAT? Do I have to pay tax on that? And what do I do with this? It's kind of gets complicated for many people outside of Turkey. But then introducing it only for the people in Turkey, introducing a kind of inequality between peer reviewers. And then you could see, you can do a little study where you pay Turkish reviewers and compare the quality of their peer review with the reviewers outside that you don't pay.
Because I understand that it's a congenital ability to be a reviewer and an editor. It's not possible to train them or to educate them.
I don't think that money, you cannot pay enough money for a really good review. So whatever you pay is too little. So I think that people don't do peer review because of the money. I don't know what are the opinions. Yeah.
How can we shorten the review process? Sometimes the reviewers cannot or don't send a review in 4 weeks and 6 weeks. To review a case report, I think the duration is 4 or 5 days is already enough, but most reviewers don't send anything in 4 weeks. And another question, sometimes reviewers don't accept to review the revision, and the editor can sometimes not decide that the author answered the questions or not. Can we send to another process reviewer?
Let me answer the first question. I mean, it would be fair from the reviewers to say right away, sorry, I can't review this, and the reviewer shouldn't accept to review a paper if they don't do it. Of course, it would be best then to remind them after 2 weeks and say, if you can't, please tell us, we'll send it to someone else, and so on. So it's all about communicating and about kind of teaching your reviewers the best behavior. Some are great, there's some answering,
Is it a problem that at the starting of the review process to send more than 15 reviewers?
Depends. I know, for example...
Is it an ethical problem?
Some journals do it. Some journals send to 7 reviewers or even more, and then they take the first 2 or 3 that they get.
We do this.
Yeah. But many journals do that, but first they invite. Not when they don't send it to many, and then they send the paper, because you're kind of distributing a confidential paper to many.
Only the abstract.
Only the abstract, yeah. Okay. And then you ask people whether they want to accept the review, and you send it only to those that answer. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. And many journals say, I think the PAJ journal, which is a new open access journal done by a person who went out of PLOS 1. They say that you should invite at least 4 reviewers to increase chances that 2 would reply. So that's fine. Again, it's an abstract, an invitation, not a full review. So when they say yes, one would expect that they do it on time. And there should be reminders. Some systems have automatic reminders of peer reviewers that if we didn't receive it and the deadline is in 2 days or something, but some reviewers, I think, you just then don't use them anymore. This is something that you have to go. And the second question was about?
Revision.
Revision, okay. Many journals ask reviewers, would you like to see the revised copy? And some say no. Some say yes. And sometimes it's difficult to know who said yes, who said no, and what to send to whom. But if they don't want to see the revision, it's their choice. They think they have done their work, and then it's up to the editor to decide based on what the editor gets. Or if you're really not sure and you need an expertise, another expertise, you send it to the third one. It's fine. No.
As far as I remember from people's workshop, she said that there was a study compared of the review quality regarding the payment, and they find no differences in the quality.
That's the answer, evidence-based answer to your question.
The time for review could be shorter if you pay them.
But if you just, if you want to add that on top of the things that you need to do for your journal, is it high on your priority list? If it is, fine.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you think works.
I want to add a comment to Alper's question. Sometimes we send invitation to several age reviewers, and 4 of them, let's say, agree to review it, and then we suddenly get to review completed, but the other 2 agree and they are on the work. Should we wait until that, or could we accept depending on the 2 reviews?
But if you think, I mean, that happens sometimes, and it's up to the editor. Sometimes, you know, especially if it's a theme issue that you have to publish on a certain date and so on and so on, we would, especially if you know the author, then you say, okay, we have received 2 reviews, we are waiting for another or 2 more, but both of them are requiring major revision, and you can start working based on this, and we will send additional comments when they arrive. That's also possible. To do it so that you kind of do not let the authors wait for your decision, and especially if the changes are major and they have to work.
I mean about, I am thinking about the reviewers, the other reviewers. They are working on the...
Yeah, but you will send that, you tell the author, because anyway they need more time to rewrite their paper. They have to, you know, do some reanalysis or something, and while they're working on it, in the meantime, we will get the other
If it
reviews
is
and
accepted
send.
by the 2 reviewers.
Then
I say accept.
No, you say major revision. You don't say accept. So they require major revision, and if you do this, we may consider it. But they have to make a revision. So you don't say accept. You don't say accept if it is a major revision. You say major revision.
We have to accept from the reviewers. They command accept paper. But there are still 2 other
Well, if you agree with them,
working on that. I mean that it can be not ethical for the other reviewers.
in that case, if they don't have many comments, and if they say accept, you can then send a mail to the other 2 reviewers and say, I'm done, will you send it or not? And then, if not, if you don't send it by this date, we will complete. We already have a positive review, and if you don't complete it by that date, we will send out. I think.
Yeah, well, the data that you presented actually demonstrate a tendency not to improve the peer review process after short-term educational process that journal laws or formal institution do for reviews. Now, do you have any data regarding more longer or more intense programs regarding peer reviewing in terms of either formal training through social medicine, MSc or something like that?
No, the study for BMJ said that they didn't find improvement after a short intervention. And long intervention they didn't test. Maybe Xenia knows that.
Did anyone...
So you don't know of a study with long-term effect of training? No. You do?
No, I was wondering also if somebody investigated if better peer reviewers were people with educated in scientific methodology, statistics.
I don't think it's... No, there's no study. You can do the study.
Yeah, it's something that makes you wonder, because if longer periods do not succeed in actually establishing a better and more critical, not criticism, but more critical peer reviewing, then it is worth educating people. And then it makes me wonder if this is the only weakness of educational system, because it's supposed that education will increase effectiveness of a procedure. So one would expect that there will be some critical point which when you overcome, it will be effective the reason for education. So I believe it might be not a short-term education for peer reviewing, but something longer that needs the time to actually set this duration. I mean, is it a month? Is it 2 months? Is it a 6-month program? Is it two years MSc? Is it a PhD?
It's not known. There is no data, and on the other hand, it may be that we are grading the quality of peer review of what we would like to get at the editors. And maybe the peer reviewers' view of what they should do is different.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, your point. Yeah.
So maybe they think they have to just see and see, oh, it's new, I like it, I don't like it. And maybe it's up for the editors to have, check the statistics, check the methodology, check the reporting. These are all technical problems. For me, very often, I want the reviewer as an expert in the field to tell me his or her gut feeling, whether this is worth investigating whether it's good or not, and then you can see whether they did a right methodological approach and so on and so on. So it's questionable. We don't know. I think there is a study looking at that, but
as editor, we do know that we have two different kind of reviews. We have reviewers who actually are capable of doing peer reviewing of the methodology and design, and reviewers who are very good in actually see the content, the scientific contents. Say for a urology manuscript, I cannot have an opinion on the usefulness of the results. But if I see the methodology, I can reject it before sending it for peer reviewing. And we have both, and we try always to combine one that can judge the methodology, one that can judge the scientific result. And sometimes I get acceptance, and I have to reject it if I see that there is deficiency. Or I get rejection, and I see very well-designed studies, and I say I need to seek some more advice, because I quite like the result of their study, and I wonder why they reject it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But then statistical significance is not clear.
Last question.
Yeah, so
Last question.
Last. Okay.
I'm sorry, because you asked before if you...
We can continue our talk.
This is not
When we invite many reviewers, we give the idea of an unpublished data to the reviewer. Suppose that he made a study about that subject. Is the editor responsible for that plagiarism or is the editor?
No, how would you know? How would you know who is going to
We
steal
have to
stuff?
trust.
Yeah, everything is based on trust, from the authors, editors, peer reviewers. What is common is that you can ask authors, and it's kind of automatic in some submission systems. You not only ask authors to suggest reviewers, but they can also ask, and it is often honored, I mean often it should be honored, that they ask that some people don't review their paper. So if you know that you have a competitor and you send it to a journal, and most likely they will send it to them because they are experts in the field, but then you think, you're racing and you want to publish first, and then you know that they are working on that, and you ask, please don't send my paper to my competitor. And editors should honor your asking for excluding some people from peer review. But you have to provide reasons. You cannot say, don't send it to him because he doesn't like me, but it has to be professional expertise that is clashing with yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.